name is Abby and welcome back to a new video. I thought I already filmed this opening, but it turns out I didn't, so I already know that I love the final product of this design, so I am so excited to start this video. I've always really been into the vintage inspired aesthetic. I just love dresses. I like when they're long and they're gorgeous and really feminine. And I made this dress a few summers ago. I wear it all the time. It has like a little cherry print, and then the top of the bust is like gathered, and then there's like this kind of contrast detail. It's a halter style top. I used a pattern to make this one a few years ago, and I don't know where the patterns are. I haven't used a pattern, I think, since I made this dress. I hate patterns, but I wear it all the time, and I love the fit of it, and I get so many compliments every time I wear it, so I figured I wanted to try to make a new one, a little different inspiration. This one's a little dark. I don't really wear black super much, but I just love the cherry print, so I decided that I wanted to remake it in something cuter. I made this dress for Valentine's Day, and I love it so much. It's a pink fabric with little swans on it. It's definitely very hard to buy fabric now that Joann's is closed. This was from Joann's. Oh my gosh, it's like talking about a lost love. I found this fabric in a fabric store in Pennsylvania. It was like in the middle of nowhere, kind of. Like, I was driving there and it said it was right there, so I parked on the street, but like I had to walk like down this sketchy hill. I don't know where, but the fabric there was absolutely beautiful, and I knew as soon as I saw this fabric I wanted to recreate this dress. I did change a little bit of details about it. It's not the exact same dress, so that way it's not like boom boom. So it's still a little fun, little flirty, and I absolutely am obsessed with it. And I really hope everybody loves it too. I think this dress is very much my style, and I'm just so excited to wear it around town and to show everybody it. So in this video, I'm going to show you how I made the dress, and I'm also going to go over how I made my measurements, because like I said, I don't really use patterns. I don't like them, and if I do use a pattern, I literally just use it for the measurements. I never listen to their instructions because I have no idea what they're really saying to me, to be honest. So I'm going to go over how I usually do my measurements, how I start a project where I'm like, oh, this is how I want the design to be, what the next steps from that are. So let's jump right in to see how I made this cute little dress. Alright, let's go over how I usually make my pattern pieces. This is my first time trying to explain the process, so please bear with me if some parts of it don't make sense. But the first thing I do is, right, I have a design. This is the design of the dress. This is what I like. The next thing I do is I break down all the pieces I think that I'm going to need to make it. I started with the bodice of the dress, starting with the center front of it. I cut out kind of like a little sideways trapezoid shape because I want it to be smaller in the middle but fan out more towards the sides. And I put this little square because I'm going to be cutting it on the center fold. And now for the back piece, I'm going to want it to swoop down a little bit because I don't want it to be flat all the way through my back, because since it's a halter back, I want it to hang down a little bit. Flat back. So these are essentially the two pieces I'm going to be using for my bodice. I'm going to need to use 2 of these for the regular fabric and 2 for the lining. So altogether, I'm basically going to have 4 pieces, but in different facings. I did not press recording, so I'm just going to do it again. So this is the front piece that is gathered. It's going to be gathered on the center front, which means it's going to be gathered on a fold. Kind of like if you want to make a symmetrical heart, you cut it on the fold, so when you open it up, both pieces are the same. That is kind of what this little square rectangle thing means. We're going to cut it on the fold, so when we open it up, it's 2 pieces that are symmetrical. And then this is the back piece. These 2 measurements are going to be the same because I'm going to end up connecting them, so that's why I only need 1 measurement right here. But for the back piece, I want it to swoop down a little bit to make it more comfortable, so it's not just a straight line all the way down. It curves slightly down on my back to also make the halter top look more appealing. So that's why this is going to then be a second measurement, but it is also going to be a smaller measurement than the first one. We also need 2 different measurements for the top and bottom pieces of the back because it's obviously wider around the top of my back versus the bottom, because this part is closer to my bust while this part is closer to my waist. So these are the pieces we are going to need for the front. I'm only going to cut one of the fabric because since it is gathered, there's going to be a lot of fabric there, and I didn't want to put a lining in because it's just a lot of bulk then around it, versus on the back, since the fabric is flat and there is no gathering, it makes it a little see-through, so I wanted to have more structure. So we're going to cut 2 of the fabric and 2 of the lining, basically making it 4 pieces all together, just 2 for the left side, 2 for the right side. Now for the skirt ended up being 5 pieces all together, so I'm going to write skirt down here, and we're going to start with the skirt measurements. Once again, I cut the first one on a center fold, so I'm going to put that line there for it. For the skirt, it flares out, so it is more gathered around my waist, so that's going to be a measurement, and it flares up more towards the bottom. The length of all my skirt pieces is the same because I want them to all be the same length. And I did cut out the same, so ×1 of the fabric and then also ×1 of my lining. And this is the skirt front. And then for the skirt side, it's kind of the same thing. They're all kind of like a trapezoid shape. So this is the skirt side and this is the skirt back for it. Once again, all 3 of them are the same length, but of course the top measurements of them do differ depending on what we're working with. The skirt sides, we're going to cut 2 of the fabric, 1 for the left, 1 for the right side, as well as 2 of the lining, basically having 4 pieces of those all together for both the skirt side and the skirt back. We're almost done labeling all the pieces. Then of course we have the binding parts where it's like this is the top edge and this was this edge, with of course the straps for it. Now the lengths of these is really up to how long you want it to be. So I'm not going to really write down those measurements, but I'm going to focus on these right here. So it is a strip. I'm just going to draw 2 little strips like this, right? And I'm just going to write top bodice and waist. Once again, I usually cut these on a center fold so I don't have to use as much fabric. Those are going to be different, but I did use the same width for both of them because I wanted it to be uniform throughout. I don't want like this piece to be thicker than this piece thicker than that. So all 4 aspects of these, the ties, the top, the waist, and the bow, all of them are the same width, which makes it easier then because I could just cut out a bunch of the strips of the fabric. So now that I've planned all the pieces I think I'm going to want to need and cut out and all that stuff, now I'm going to start writing down the measurements of these pieces. Alright, now that I have all the pieces I believe I'm going to cut out written down and planned out, next is going to be taking down the measurements for it. It's important to wear clothing that's not like super loose, like a sweatshirt, sweatpants. You don't want things like that. You do want something that is a little bit more tight, but you don't want it to be so tight where it's going to mess up your measurements. So this is a good outfit because it's not going to mess up my measurements, and it's going to be really accurate to what they are. And I have this cute little panda tape measure. I love it so much. I've had it for years and it always comes in clutch in moments like this since it is bendable, but my cats have gotten at it, so it is a little destroyed, but it still works. I always use my own body as a guide. I feel like that makes it a lot easier, and that way I know the measurements are going to fit me. I do have a mannequin, but for some reason, like the mannequin is adjustable, so I do have it set to my measurements, but I feel like when I put a dress on it, it might not fit the mannequin as well, but it'll fit me perfectly. So I always just trust my own measurements, and then if anything, I just set it on the mannequin to like let it hang, to like work on it again. So I always just trust my own measurements, and I use my trusted little thing. I do take my measurements for every single project, even though they're the same for every single project. It makes me feel more secure to like double check to make sure that it'll fit me, and also like it helps with the breakdown of how big each piece should be and where exactly it's going to be on my body. So that way also after you make it and cut the pieces out, if you try it on, that way then you get a visual of where exactly you wanted the piece to fall, where it was supposed to fall with the measurements, and how it is falling now that you've cut out the pieces. But yeah, that's usually how I get my pieces. As you can probably tell, I don't use patterns and I don't do mock-ups because I'm lazy. And patterns sometimes confuse me. So I actually taught myself how to sew, and I taught myself this method, and it seems to work pretty well for me. I would say the hardest part is definitely trying to visualize the pieces that you need. I think a big help is that if you're making something you know, like maybe you're recreating something or you have like something that's very similar to it, you can maybe look up the pieces online and try to analyze and break down, you know, like look at the seam lines and see how it's made. Because once you understand the pieces that you need, I think finding out the measurements you need is way easier. Because you can always change and alter it as you go along. But yeah, that's how I make my measurement. I think definitely if you are beginning, you could try to do it with like a muslin fabric where it's like a cheap little light fabric. Try to just plan out the pieces and cut them out so that you get an idea of how they're going to work together before then you actually do the real thing. Sometimes mock-ups are your friends, but they have never been a friend of mine. Maybe one day. When sketching the dress, I penciled in this middle bow part. I wasn't sure if the dress was going to be too busy or not, so I decided to wait until the end, and at the end I did decide that I wanted to put the bow in, so the bow is included in the final design. To start, I cut out the middle part of my bodice. Since I wanted it to be slightly gathered in the front, I cut it out slightly longer than I needed it to be on the center fold. I then cut out the back bodice pieces, making sure to cut out double for the lining. I did not do a lining for the gathered front bust piece because there was already so much fabric happening there and I did not want to make it bulkier. Once I had all my bust pieces cut out, I used my hand sewing needle to gather the top and bottom edge of the front bust piece. You can use your sewing machine to do this by doing a basting stitch along the edge with the longest stitch length possible and pulling the threads, but I've always preferred to do it myself by hand. With the gathers temporarily in place, I pinned both of the back bodice pieces to either side of the front bust piece, making sure that the lining bodice back was on the other side. After sewing those pieces together, I began with cutting out my skirt. The skirt was 5 pieces, with it being more form-fitting around my waist and flaring out closer to my knees. I did still give myself some room to pleat the skirt a bit along the sides of my waist. I also repeated these pieces on a white fabric to be my lining underneath. The fabric was a bit sheer in the light, so the lining skirt helped to make the skirt thicker, and for the lace detail I added at the end. Once I had all of my skirt pieces cut out, I pinned them right sides together, leaving the back open to insert my zipper later on. After sewing the skirt panels together, I serged down the side seams and back raw edges of both skirt pieces. With the skirts complete, I took back out my bodice and connected them to the skirts. I originally wanted to do slight gathers on either side for the skirt, but with the 2 layers of skirts it became a bit thick, so I instead did slight pleats along the sides. I made sure to evenly space out the gathers of the bottom front bust piece, and once everything was pinned, I sewed it down. I then used my serger once more to serge down that seam and to clean up the raw edges. To close up the back, I folded in the side edges of the back and I pinned my zipper down. Underneath the zipper, I matched up the skirt edges with the skirt and lining skirt being pinned separately, and I sewed those up first before I finished sewing down my zipper. Before sewing down my zipper, I first put on my contrast bias tape. To make it, I cut out 3 strips of white fabric, with 1 strip being the circumference of the top of my bodice, and the other 2 being the length of the straps for my halter top. Using my iron, I first folded the straps in half and ironed them down, making a guide for the middle. Opening them back up, I folded in each edge and ironed them down before folding the strip back in half, essentially folding the strip into fourths to tuck in and hide away the raw edge. On the sides, I folded in the side raw edge for the ends that would be visible, so only one end of each halter strap was folded in, since the other end would be sewn into the dress. Once I had all my strips ironed and pinned, I sewed down one side of the strap to hold them closed for my halter straps alone, setting aside the bodice top strip for a moment. Once my halter straps were sewn, I brought all 3 strips back to my dress and began pinning the strip along the top edge of the bodice. I made sure to evenly space out the gathers for the top edge of my center bust. Once it was all pinned, I inserted in my halter straps in the back of the dress within the bias tape. With everything pinned, I began with sewing down my zipper and then sewing down my bias tape along the top edge, making sure that the straps were securely in place as I sewed over them. Above the zipper there was this bit of a gap because of the strip, so I used a hook and eye to pull them together, hand sewing them down in place. With the base of the dress complete, I did a rolled hem of the pink skirt first to make sure that I liked the length, and then I began with planning the lace for the underneath skirt lining. For the lining skirt, I folded in the rolled hem along the bottom and pinned in the lace trim along with it. I only wanted there to be one seam, so I sewed the rolled hem down along with sewing down the lace trim. I pinned the lace trim so that it would peek out just below the pink skirt lining, and once the trim was complete, I decided that I did want the middle part of the dress to have a bow, so I cut out another strip and repeated what I did for the halter top with the ironing and sewing, and then I pinned it over the waistline seam. I did not want the stitching to be visible, so I used my hand sewing needle to sew down both sides of the strip to the dress, which did take some time, but I loved how it turned out. Using more of the strips, I cut out 3 more rectangles, with 1 rectangle to be the tails of the bow that hang down, 1 to be the loops of the bow, and 1 to be the middle part of the bow that connects the rectangles. Using my hand sewing needle again, I first folded in the middles of the rectangles to be the loops and wrapped the thread around it to secure it. Then I placed it together with the tails of the bow and wrapping it in the tiny strip, folding in the raw edges of the back. Once I hand sewed the middle of the bow, I sewed the bow right down in the middle of the waist, making sure to hide the stitching. Then the last thing I did was to make sure that the halter straps were secured, so I decided to sew them down to the top edge of the strip. I did not want any stitching along the top, so I used my hand sewing needle once more to secure it, making sure that the stitching never went through to the front. And after all of this, my dress was finally complete.